program today about Vice of the Rising Nation. In this chapter particularly, we'll be talking about a special topic because, well, in the last week we have been going around like generally violence and chaos in the archipelago. So in this case, one got the opportunity to have a deep conversation about before start with a word of prayer for this program today. So the word of prayer will invite him also to as well to this.
Good morning to everyone. We are having some connection issues here, Kenny. Good morning. I see that we are having some connection issues. We apologize for Ken's connection, but we cannot hear what you are saying, Ken. You have a breaking up behind you. So can you hear me, Ken? You are breaking up.
I can hear you. You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. So you have a better connection signal?
I think it's more stable now.
Okay, so just start over, please, because we didn't hear anything you said this now.
Okay. I wanted to welcome everyone to this chapter of Vice of the Rising Nation. It's a special edition this Friday morning we're having today. And we're going deep in a topic we have been like going around in this program in several chapters with the topic of violence and chaos in the archipelago. We have been going around it like generally and in different aspects, but in this case we have a special look to it, a more professional look to it, in the with the excellent Mr. Dr. Britain.
Unfortunately, you're breaking up again, Ken.
For reflection, sample when I get the chance to read them.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up. And we can't hear you. We want to give welcome as well to our radio listeners. And all those listening, you can call us to +57 if you're calling out of the country. +57 318 729 4817. I don't know if you could connect to a stabler connection or Ken, because we can't understand what you're saying. You're breaking up. So in the meantime, while Ken fixes his connection, I don't know if we have Pastor Alberto Gordon present with us. Pastor, good morning. Could you have a word of prayer for us to begin? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and of course, I'll be glad to do this. So let's pray. Father God, this morning we want to thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for this program. We thank you for the topic that is about to be deal with this morning. We pray that our audience will be helped and that our entire audience at this moment will receive insight on how to manage and how to deal with different situations that surfaces in our life on a daily basis. So we look to you for your guidance, we look to you for help, and we pray your presence to accompany us during this program and all our programs. In Jesus' name, we ask your blessing on those there in studio, and we ask that you will help us to find the quick solution to the little technical issues that would be surfacing every now and then. We thank you and we bless your name in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Pastor. So let's see if we have Ken back with fixing his connection. Thank you, Pastor Alberto. So Ken was saying that today we are having a discussion about the difference between dangerous minds and criminal minds. So while Ken comes back, let's put on the presentation. And well, I was invited as the guest today, and it seems like I have to present myself. So I don't know. Let's see if Ken is back. Ken, are you connected? Yes, Ken is back. Welcome back, Ken.
Hello, hello. Sorry for the difficulties and issues with the internet connection. I am out of the island currently, and right now is raining a lot, so maybe that is messing a little bit with the signal. So, but if I keep
You're breaking up again, Ken. Sorry.
continue with this conversation. Thank you, Pastor Alberto, for the word of prayer. And to begin, I want to introduce Mr. Dr. Sifri Castell Britton once more. He's a PhD in criminal mind and justice, criminal justice. And well, he also have a master in forensic psychology. So, well, in this chapter, we're going to talk about, begin to talk about dangerous minds and where did the dangerous mind come
We're having serious issue with Ken's connection. We really can't understand what you're saying, Ken. He's asking the question,
from,
where did
and
it
not like just
we can't understand you, Ken, because you're breaking up. Your connection is really, really bad today. Sorry. So Ken is asking the question, where did the title Dangerous Mind come from? And then he's asking two questions. Why do some people become violent? Are criminal born or are they formed? Thank you for that. And thank you for the invitation as well. I'm really happy to be here with all of you again. And welcome to our radio listeners. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to call, you can do it at +57 if you're calling out of the country, 318-729-4817. Ken, we really thank you and appreciate you a lot. And thank you for having this invitation with us today. And I know that you are in a different city out of the archipelago, and you're having some connection issues. But in the meantime, while you fix your connection, I will go ahead and answer these questions here. So you're saying, where did the title Dangerous Mind come from? When I speak about dangerous minds, I'm not speaking about just one book. So the book Dangerous Mind is part of a body of work that has developed over many, many years of research and real life experience. So it starts with Dangerous Minds. Yeah, it starts with Dangerous Minds, where I explore how the mind becomes vulnerable. Not overnight, of course, not overnight, but over time, through silence, through neglect, and emotional pain that never really gets addressed. Weeks back, even months now back, we were talking about violence, um, not just on our archipelago. For our listeners, I know that we will have some people connected from uh, one of the universities I teach at. So welcome to you all. Welcome to my students from the Emotional Intelligence course from the University of the People. Thanks for joining us if you are connecting. Or you will be seeing um, this chapter of this program of the Voice of the Racial Nation after we finish, because we have a huge time difference in some of the countries where you are located. What we study at Varying Emotional Intelligence is not only theory, it is what we see here in real life with what we're going to talk today. And is when a young person, for example, cannot recognize to express their emotions. Those emotions do not disappear; they build up and often come out through other way or other behavior. Um, this is why emotional awareness matters. That we spoke about that in the course in emotional intelligence, and that is why empathy matters as well, and that is why learning how to listen, not just hear, becomes so important, because emotional intelligence gives us the ability to recognize um, what is happening beneath the surface and before it turns into something more serious. And in many ways, what prevents a dangerous mind from developing further is exactly that: someone with emotional awareness to notice, to understand, and to respond in a different way. So, welcome as well, all my students from the University of the People, from the course Emotional Intelligence. And if we have other students as well from the psychology course from the other university, welcome as well. So, we were saying that when I speak about dangerous mind, it's not just one book in particular. So, after that book of this book of Dangerous Mind, then comes The Criminal Minds, the other book I wrote, which looks at something different. That point where a person crosses a line, not just in action, but in thinking as well. So where behavior becomes intentional and patterns begin to form. Um, After that, there is another book which is Restored Minds. This part, we are having a feedback. You can put your microphone on silence in the meantime. Thank you. The third book is Restored Mind. Okay, so we're saying that the third book is Restored Mind. I need the presentation, please. Thank you. So the third book is Restored Mind. We are saying, just leave the presentation there. Thank you. So they can see the questions. With can ask the question, where did the title Dangerous Mind come from? And it says, why do some people become violent? And if our criminals are born or are they formed? So let's just put the guest and the speaker to the left, just so it is, and the presentation to the right. That's perfect, because right there we can read what we want to see. From all of the work of research of these three books, Dangerous Minds, Criminal Minds, and Restored Minds, came a theory that I called identity restoration theory. I'm really happy that yesterday, precisely, Walden University published an article about identity restoration theory. This is a very important theory that I uh, discovered, and this explains how real rehabilitation happens. Not just stopping behavior, but changing the person in a way that reduces the risk of going back into crime, not only here in the Caribbean, but anywhere in the world. So that process of going back and committing crime again, we call that recidivism in criminal justice. So when you hear I speak about the term recidivism, I'm speaking about somebody that offends and then go back and offend. So in other words, somebody go to prison and come out and go back, and that process is called recidivism. Recidivism. So in this process of writing these books, this series of books, Dangerous Minds, Criminal Minds, and Restored Minds, came the theory of identity restoration theory. So I have worked in restorative justice programs in Medellin and Cali, Colombia. What is restorative justice program? Is a program specified not just in Colombia but worldwide. It's a new theory a couple years ago now that was created by a well-known psychologist to and criminologist to develop a type of situation where somebody that commits a crime doesn't exactly need to go to prison. That person can have the opportunity to restore back with the victims. So it's a process between victims and the perpetrators or the offenders, and the facilitator, in other words, the psychologist or the facilitator, work with them separately and then join them in a restorative justice cycle to get back to a healing or to a restoration process. This is happening in Colombia right now, and I had the opportunity to work in this program in Medellin and in Cali, Colombia, with offenders and ex-offenders trying to rebuild their lives. I have worked as well in youth detention center in Bogota, sitting with young people who are already in conflict with the law. And here in the Cayman Islands, I've worked with men and women in prison. And I have also had the opportunity to work with incarcerated individuals in the United States. So during my master's in forensic psychology and my PhD in criminal justice, I had a program that many prisons in the United States, well, majority of the prisons in the United States, they have a program where the inmates can have a tablet. This is something really innovative. And I think that is something that really could be managed in the whole world, that inmates should not be just separated from the world. They lock them up in prison and they can't have not even a tablet or access to computer. So this tablet is with internet, but is of course supervised by the prison. And they have a special app. So you can have to download an app on your phone and you can connect with them. And many of them write in special program, which is the famous pen pal, where they can access to the world and people can write them. So you have Christian programs, or you have different types of people that just want to write and they need to have studies and so on. So I was part of this program to speak with different inmates from different prisons around the world. Well, sorry, in the United States, and from different prisons in the United States, both dangerous, very dangerous prison prisons in the United States, and normal moderate prisons as well in the United States. So I had the opportunity there to do my studies in my master's and my PhD with these type of inmates in the United States as well. So the research starts across boundaries, different countries, different systems, different cultures. But one thing kept coming back to me. Behind the behavior, there is always a story. There's always a story. So in most cases, that story did not start with the crime. No matter what crime the person commit, it did not start with the crime. It started long before. So let's go to the following slide where I will really answer now this question, the origins of a dangerous mind. Let's go to the following slide. Okay, so this slide really helps us answer the question. Why do some people, Ken was asking, why do some people become violent? And are criminals born or are they formed? I want to make a difference between what is a criminal mind and what is a dangerous mind. So you will understand this here. We're first speaking about a dangerous mind. Now, why this topic is important is because we have been speaking about violence in our archipelago of San Andres, Providence, and Santa Catalina. So for my students listening from different countries, when we speak about San Andres, Providence, and Catalina, or San Andres, Old Providence, and Catalina, there are three islands that were colonized by British, and they're in the Caribbean, and today they are attached to Colombia. They are adoptive children from Colombia in South America. Although the islands are in Central America, they belong to a country in South America. And there is one of the most overpopulated islands, I can't really say in the world, but at least in America. And we are having some serious issues with overpopulation and with violence in our territory. Of course, the violence is caused by overpopulation. So that's why we're talking about this important topic today. Not really to promote my book, as someone was saying, oh, you want to promote your book? Not really. This is an important topic and it has to do with the research that I was just telling you about. Many years, we're talking about many years of experience in academia in working with inmates, ex-offenders and offenders in Medellin, Cali, Bogota, interviewing ex-offenders for my dissertation, for my PhD or my doctorate in San Andres, Hope, Providence, and Catalina. And of course, with inmates in the Cayman Islands, in research in the Cayman Islands, of course, in the United States, in the prison I mentioned. So let's go to the origins of the dangerous minds. When we talk about crime, we usually focus on the act, right? What happened, who did it, and how it was done. But the act is not where the story begins. The beginning is here. Because what we are looking at here in this particular slide is not yet a criminal mind. So what is called neglect? It says child neglect. Over the years, I started noticing that many individuals who later engage in crime, they share a similar early experience. And that early experience is what you're seeing here on this slide. The first one is neglect. When we say neglect, we are speaking about something abstract? No, we're not. Neglect means a child who comes to school without proper care, for example. Neglect means a child who is hungry and nor caregivers, nor parents, nor tutors are there to give him food. Neglect means a child who is left on their own without supervision or attention. That is neglect. Neglect is a person who, or a child who, well, teenager as well, child and teenagers who is not being addressed. His needs are not being addressed. That is neglect. So he's a child who speaks, but nobody really listens. The child who is there, but feels invisible. Excuse me. So somebody is commenting here. Let me check this. Okay. Yeah, somebody is saying that is a very important topic. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so we are saying that a child who speaks but nobody listens, the child who is there but feels invisible. And over the time, that child starts to form a belief. A very dangerous one indeed. The child starts saying, I don't matter, I don't care, no one sees me. I am not valued, I'm not important. Because if a child goes to school dirty, his uniform is not washed on time, or doesn't have food to eat when he comes out from school, or doesn't have anything to eat at school, or doesn't have his books at school, or goes with the wrong shoes, or cannot go with the right uniform. And that happens not just in Colombia, for those listeners from other countries. It happens, I know, in your country as well, in different African territories, in different countries where you are and studying at University of the People. It happens constantly, right? Neglect. And I know that neglect is not sometimes because parents want really to have their kids in neglect, but it happens. So sometimes the parents are not really the faulted one to have a child in neglect. The second situation that we're having in a dangerous mind is emotional abandonment, feeling alone inside. When neglect becomes emotional, we call it emotional abandonment. We already know what is neglect, right? When a child is not being addressed, his needs not being addressed. So, and then after that, when that neglect becomes emotional, we call that emotional abandonment. This means, Ken, welcome back. I see that you're having some issues, and I know you don't have the fault, but it's raining where you are. So thank you for joining back. This means, Ken, listeners, that the child grows up without emotional support, without guidance, without someone who understands their feelings. So the child is not only there physically with neglect, but also the child is alone emotionally. So these are what we call absent present parents. So the parents that has to work and saying, I have to work because if I don't work, how will they eat? So they have to be out there working and struggling to attend the home. But the kids they come back from school and the parents are not home. They go to school and sometimes they're not even home, right? The third one is exposure to violence. learning harm as normal. So in many cases, this same child also exposed to violence. And many people believe violence, when we're talking about violence in our territory and worldwide, they believe it's a gun shooting or a robbery, and they call that violence only, Ken. But violence at home is in our different communities on the different sections of our islands and different places. Over the time, the child begins to learn that violence is something normal because they hear mama and papa shouting. They hear them, fighting. It doesn't have to fight with a knife, but they fighting all the time and, discussing over food, over this, over jealousy, or whatever. Yeah. And that violence is a way to solve their problems. So that violence is a way to gain respect as well. So that's the third situation for a dangerous mind. And the fourth situation is the lack of belonging, searching for identity. And this is where identity restoration theory came in. So at the same time, this child begins to feel something deeper. A lack of belonging, says, I really don't belong here. That's why you see many children don't want to be home. They want to be on the street because they don't feel at home is a safe place for them. The child does not feel accepted at home unconsciously. So they really don't feel accepted at home because mama and papa are always out working, or sometimes they come home and they don't even pay them attention. The child comes home and the child say, Papa, I went good in school today, I said, go play. I don't have the time, no, go play. Or thing like that. The words that create, character and personality. The wrong words that are used at home. Now, for the listeners from our universities connecting, sometimes you'll hear some words in Creole. Creole is our language from the islands or the archipelago from San Andres and Providence. These students, they speak different languages, Ken, because they're from majority of the students from the University of the People is an American university, but majority of our students are from different African territories, different countries in Africa. And I give emotional intelligence course with them. And I have more than 100 students. I really don't know the number, 200 and something students in that particular course. And they were invited to join, but because of the time difference, maybe that we will have them join in. But they're in time zones. So welcome if you're here. Ken, so I want to finish your question here with this part here. Someone is saying, how can this book, Dangerous Minds, transform the critical thinking and worldwide of young people in the 21st century in a context where the habit of reading is declining? Oh, that's a good question, Mr. Jorge. We will answer that question soon. But let me go through this part of the question first of what Ken was asking, how a dangerous mind is formed, or the origin of a dangerous mind. The other part of this searching for identity or lack of belonging, then comes the lack of guidance. No one showing the way. So no one showing the way of this child to conducting this child. So where we see this coming now. So first, the childhood neglect, then we have emotional abandonment, then we have exposure to development, lack of belonging, and then we have lack of guidance. So all of these are connected. All of these are factors, right? No one teaches the child how to manage emotions. So no one shows the child how to deal with anger or frustration, for example. No one guides the child toward better choices, not because mama or papa doesn't want to. It's because they can't sometimes, because they're not there present. They're absent present parents many times. They're working out the whole time. They come home tired. They go to bed. They're just going to say, you have any tarea? Tarea mean homework. You have any homework? Okay, you finish your homework already? Basic questions. You have lunch already? Come and have your supper. Things like that. And they don't have the time to sit down and talk with the kid, right? Or talk with the teenager. So after this lack of guidance comes violence rarely begins with violence. So this is a key message here. Violence rarely begins with violence. It begins with much earlier. It begins with silence. Silence in the home where the child is not heard. Silence in the school where the child is not understood. And silence in society where the child feels invisible. The final insight here is when pain has no voice. When emotions are not expressed through words, they do not disappear. They stay inside. So this child starts developing a lot of things. And then in my research, I use the ones we have down here: Bowley, Bandura, Wyndham, Gilligan, Hershey, Agnew, Moffitt, Farrington. These were the base or the core researchers that I used during my research in criminal minds and dangerous minds and restored minds. And finally, the theory, identity restoration theory. So crime is visible, but the silence that created it is not. We see the child committing the crime. When I say child, I mean teenager, adult, because it's a child in that adult body committing a crime, a child that was not heard. Let's go to the following slide to explain this. And we will see here now the research in understanding. So from research to understanding. Here I want to explain this a little clearer. Blessed morning to everyone. The same thing to Salma. Welcome, Salma, and thank you for joining us. So in this following slide, let's understand the result that we just discussed and place it within what research consistently shows. Because across psychology and criminology, there is a strong agreement. Yeah, you can open it big. We don't really have to be on the screen, but you open it big so we can read it bigger. So yeah, you can leave it like that until we finish. Thank you. Violence is not random. It follows a process. And that process shaped early through lived experiences that leave emotional traces. What research really highlights is not just the presence of difficulty experience, but what happens when those experiences are not processed. So when neglect, as we mentioned before, rejection, humiliation are not addressed, they do not disappear. They stay active. They stay active, shaping perception, shaping reactions, shaping identity. Over the time, behavior begins to reflect what has been internalized. And this is where we need to be very clear at. Violence is not always the starting point. We see people shooting guns, stealing, and so on, but very often it is the outcome of emotions that were never understood, never guided, never given space. And this is a conversation for parents, for caregivers, for teachers, for everyone that has to do with children and teenagers. We see the child committing a crime. When I say child, we have a lot of minors committing crime, not just in our territory, but abroad. Yeah. We see the child committing a crime, but then we just point our finger, he's a criminal. He has to go to prison, right? Right away we think that. Behind what we later label as a dangerous mind, there is often a history that was never fully recognized. And that is where I say in the core of my book, I say, behind every dangerous mind, there is a child who was never heard. A child who was never heard. And in the following slide, Ken, I want to tell you where exactly it starts, in 3 silences. Let's go to the following slide and we will see that. In this slide here, we have where the crimes begins, the silent beginning of crime. So it starts with what I call silence. And that's why I remember you. I want to remind you the core message of the book, Dangerous Mind. Behind every dangerous mind, there is a child who was never heard. You asked that important question earlier, Ken. Why do some people become violent, and whether individuals are born or if this way or shape over time. This was shaped over the time. What this slide shows us here is how the process really begins. When I look back to the individuals I have worked with in Medellin, Cali, Bogota, San Andres Island, the Cayman Islands, in the prisoners or inmates that I interviewed in the United States and so on, I keep seeing the same pattern unfolding very early in life. It's a pattern. It does not begin with violence. When they start telling their story, it begins with absence. An absence of a voice, absence of connection, an absence of being truly seen. Somebody that was not seen since childhood. First, there was what I call silence at home. A child can grow up surrounded by people. They have auntie, granny, cousin, mama, papa, and still feel completely unheard. Emotions are brushed aside. Yeah? Questions go unanswered. Slowly, the child begins to learn something, that expressing pain does not change anything. Because if he says, for example, somebody molested me today in school, and I want to clarify this word molest for our students listening. In our Creole term or language, molest doesn't mean sexually harassment. For us, molest means like somebody um, disturbed me, or somebody bother me. So our term molest is not sexual harassment, because in English, molest means sexual harassment. But in Creole, our language from our territory, molest for us is bother. So that's why I say in the term. So the child says, somebody bother me, for you to understand better. Somebody bothered me. And what happened to you now? Grow up. Be a man. Stop cry. Man, no cry. And those terms that unconsciously we are telling our children, yeah, and they are saying, well, if I express how I feel, it doesn't change anything. So I will stop expressing my feeling then, right? That is silence at home. The child is not heard. Then silence follows them into school. They sit in a classroom, they follow instructions, but no one really understands what is happening inside of this child. Struggles go unnoticed. And I can tell you about that. I worked in a facility in the Cayman Islands in 2019, 2020 as a school inclusion specialist, where from the mainstream education in the British system, they take out students with bad behavior or behavioral issues and different problems. They take them out from the mainstream education and they send a special place. And then we have the school inclusion specialists that we attend them there, and we get them back updated to go back to school, or to go back to the mainstream education. And there you can see the majority of these teenagers and children that they go there with a lot of difficulties. Some are identified with ADHD, for example, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And this is a worldwide thing. The attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is when you see the kids busybody, and you call them the busybody ones in the classroom, not just in the Cayman Islands, in Colombia, in African territories, in the United States. In every country, you have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? So the kids that are busybody definitely doesn't mean they have to be ADHD kids. So we have some different comments there, and we will answer those in a minute. So these kids that are branded or labeled as ADHD, or we have as well the ODD, oppositional defiant disorder kids. Who are these oppositional defiant disorder kids? Those that reject authority. For example, those that will say in our Creole, man, don't tell me nothing. Don't tell me nothing. And don't listen, or we call them the assurance one, or the one that answer back, right? Those type of kids. The one that like to fight, the one that like to hit, the one that like to pinch, the one like to, always having struggles with their classmates. Yes. Or we have as well the ones that just are withdraw themselves back and are silent in the classroom, the shy ones, and they want to sit in the back. They don't want to participate. They're over shy. They don't want to talk. What are teachers doing about these? Teachers go there and just teach their subject, math, English, and whatever, but they are not seeing these kids. The kids are there, or yes, Ken, go ahead, please.
Just to interrupt 1 second, and because right now, for example, in my experience, I graduated 10 years ago now, and we was 45 students in each classroom. So it's really difficult also for how this system is built, because it's not built to respond to those kind of necessities. It just respond to amount of children graduating. It's just a system. So it's difficult for teachers, and it's really people that really have the interest, that really take the time and try identify the students or the different childs, as you mentioned, in the classroom that are withdrawn or isolated, or maybe they're hyperactive and maybe have ADHD and have different signs of maybe can become possibly a dangerous mind or a criminal mind. So it's really hard for a teacher with 45 students by course, and she have 8, 10 courses. Is really difficult. So,
Indeed, Ken. Indeed. Very difficult. Thank you for that. Because that's the problem that we're having, not just in Colombia, but many places where you have 35, 45, even 50 students or more in a classroom, which is anti-pedagogical, correct? And they don't have a teacher's aide or a teacher assistant to help them in the classroom. And not just that, but you have as well the new imposition of the Ministry of Education that you must have special needs kids in the classroom. So apart from the kids without these special needs, we don't want to say normal and abnormal because all of them are normal. You have that in mind. So special needs kids, you have students with special needs in the classroom. When I'm talking about special needs, we're talking about cognitive impairment, or we have students with dyslexia, with high dyscalculia, with the same ADHD is another disorder, with ODD is another disorder, etc. Yeah, and the cognitive impairment, what we call the one of the different syndrome. Yeah, different syndrome that they can have. Down syndrome and so on, they can be in the classroom with other students. And the teacher that is not trained to deal with these type of students, they must deal with them. That is a craziness, because the teacher has to prepare the lessons for the subject. For example, if I'm teaching, let's say, English, I have to go and prepare my lessons for English, my English lesson to teach, let's say, 35 students that don't have special needs according to the teacher, or the psychologist of the school. 35 students, oh, they are not special needs. But between those 35, you can have 5 or 6 ADHD students, and they're not diagnosed. They are there, invisible in the classroom. Or you can have a dyslexic student in the classroom, but is invisible. So they are calling the special needs in the classroom because they have Down syndrome. Oh, it's a special needs because of Down syndrome. Yeah? So because the child has Down syndrome, it's a special needs kid. But what about dyslexic student? And there are research about this, that the majority of our students are dyslexics. When I'm talking dyslexics, for example, the confusion of the letters. In our territory, we're trilingual, for example. This is a very big discussion. And those listening and have to do with education will understand what I'm talking about. This section of this program today belongs to education, but we want to start it today on the Voice of the Racial Nation. I want to have a special section apart from the Wednesday evening at 8:30 of our education section and our Voice of the Racial Nation on Fridays at 8 o'clock. We want to have a separate program just to talk about violence and dangerous minds and criminal minds, the differences between them. Because we ourselves are forming a dangerous mind without noticing. With the silence of these kids at home, with the silence of these kids in school. And then out comes the other part with the silence in society. So the child begins to internalize some labels. They stop seeing themselves as someone who is struggling and start seeing themselves as a problem. Because when you say, oh, he's a special need, oh, he's ADHD, oh, he's ODD, you start putting labels on the kids. Or he's the one who molests. Remember, molest is not sexual harassment. He's the one who bother in the class. He's the bad behavior one. Oh, that one is the leader of the classroom. That one is the ringleader. And the same teachers start branding the kid and start shaming the kid in front of the others. So for example, oh, so you are the one who them molest. Come and stand up front here. Well, today you can't do that. Put them in the corner with the hands up, kneeling up. Because of the old school system, you could hit them with a rule in the hand. And trust me, I'm going to tell you something as an educational psychologist. Those days were the best. Today, you can't do it. You can't scold a child. But in the day where teacher was respected and where teacher could hit a child in the class, with a ruler in the hand, wasn't the right way to do it. Wasn't the right way to shame the child in front of the classroom. But today you have men and women in our territories are outstanding leaders that came from that old-time school. When teachers were an authority, and they used to respect the teacher. Today, kids don't respect the teacher. Hush your fat self. F off. Hush up. Don't tell me anything. You are not my father. You are not my mother. And worse things they're telling their teachers. Small little kids. Small kids. And worse the teenagers. All right. Let's go now to the silence in the society. A deeper disconnection. So the feeling of not belonging anywhere, of moving through the world without recognizing, without feeling recognized or valued. This is where it becomes critical, my friends. Those emotions that the kid was feeling in home, not being seen, being heard at school, then go on in the society. The emotions did not disappear. They do not fade away with time. They stay and they build up and they look for another way out. When a person cannot express pain through words, they begin to express it through behavior. And sometimes through anger, sometimes through defiance. The ODD kids or the oppositional defiant kid, that they don't like authority. And sometimes through actions that society later calls crime. So I want us to go to the following slide that shows when the street becomes the teacher. Somebody was asking a big question here, and I'm saying, if silence exists in multiple environments, which one is the most critical point for intervention? That's a very good question. When the child was not heard and there was nothing addressed at home, nothing addressed at school, then comes the silence of the street where society is seeing what is going on and no one takes place, talking about leaders and authorities and people who have to do with the child apart from home and school. Your neighborhood, for example, where people in the neighborhood had the authority not to scold the kid, but to, call his attention. Why you are on the street at this time? Where is your mom? We don't see that today. When you could have the authority, you see someone's child up on the street, a little kid, 10 years, whatever, on the street at night, 9, 10 at night, and still on the street. And everybody passes and with blank eyes, everybody passes invisible. They don't care. That was not happening in our territory. You used to see the kid and say, young boy, come a minute. Who you for? Who are you for again? Who is your parents? Oh, you are Mr. So please go home. What are you doing on the street? When the street becomes invisible, this is what happens here now. And that question that this person just asked, if silence exists in multiple environments, which one is the most critical point for intervention? When the kid doesn't feel heard at home, doesn't feel heard at school, and then go to the street, you're almost to the critical point of passing that child from a dangerous mind to a criminal mind. You see? Because there is a difference. So then comes this. Once that silence settles in, something begins to change. When home does not feel safe, when school does not feel like a place of understanding, young people start looking somewhere else for something very basic. They are looking for belonging. They're looking for belonging. I don't belong home. I don't belong school. So the street I can feel somewhere there. So when that need is not met in healthy spaces, it does not disappear. It shifts. Something's happen. Something is happening with this kid now. The street comes in and embraces kids, and it's not just a place. It's a teacher. The street becomes the teacher of this kid because the street offers something immediate. It offers recognition. It offers identity. The street even offers a sense of power. And that power comes at a cost. But what it teaches is very different from what we would hope. It teaches power instead of dialogue. It teaches fear instead of trust. And it teaches, as the slide says, recognition through risk. So for many young people, the street becomes the first place where they feel seen, They feel seen. And even if it is the wrong way or the wrong place, once that identity starts to form there, it becomes much harder to step away from it. So definitely answer the question to Tama Sanch channel. Tama Sanch channel. It becomes difficult or critical up the intervention with the kid when he has this recognition in the street. This is where we need to make a very clear distinction here between a dangerous mind and a criminal mind. And I want to explain this in the following slide. What is the difference between a dangerous mind? Let's go to the following slide and we'll explain this. What is the difference between a dangerous mind and a criminal mind? Okay, someone is saying here. Okay, great. All right, so this one is very small, but I will explain it here. You can hardly see it. Okay, we can put it bigger so we can see the slide maybe. All right. If you look here on this slide, a dangerous mind is not necessarily a criminal mind. That's the first part. A dangerous mind is not necessarily a criminal mind. What is important here? This is a very important part. Many times we treat them as if they were the same, a dangerous mind and a criminal mind. They are not. A dangerous mind is shaped by childhood neglect, as we mentioned before. Childhood neglect, emotional abandonment, humiliation, and silence, and lack of belonging. So what we are seeing here is a mind that has been formed through experience, right? Not a mind that was born this way. And this is the key idea right here. A dangerous mind is a mind at risk. At risk. So a dangerous mind started with, again, childhood neglect, emotional abandonment, humiliation and silence, and lack of belonging. A child at risk, right? That we have in mind. At this stage, there is still a space to intervene for the person asking where is difficult or the most difficult or critical part to intervene. Right here, where the child is still having neglect and abandonment and so on, and still a dangerous mind, is really not difficult to intervene. There is still space to guide. There is still space to change direction. Now, if we move to the other part here in this slide, we see a criminal mind is different. This is when a line has already been crossed, not only in behavior, but in thinking as well. So patterns begin to form that justify the harm. And over time, those patterns start to feel normal for the kid. So this is where everything connects. Not every dangerous mind becomes a criminal mind. You have to have that in mind. Because this dangerous mind has intervention on time, but something can be done. But many criminal minds were once dangerous minds. The majority, according to research, majority of were criminal minds, people committing crimes, once they were dangerous minds. So what does this tell us? It tells us, you can put us back there now. It tells us something important that that if we wait until we see the crime, we are already late. The real opportunity is earlier. So when the mind is still forming, when the person is still searching, when intervention can still change the path of this kid with neglect, of this kid with abandonment and so on, and the kid with difficulties and so on. If we understand that, not every dangerous mind becomes a criminal mind, and that many criminal minds started at being a mind at risk, then something can be done. So if teachers notice these kids with withdrawal in school, if these teachers notice the kids with maybe hyper kids, let's don't call them ADHD kids. Let's call them hyper kids. So we want to thank our radio listeners. It's time for them to leave. But we want to invite you to come on our Facebook Live, on our YouTube Live, and welcome and thank you for joining us, our radio listeners. And you can come back and listen to us on YouTube Live and Facebook Live. Thank you. And goodbye to our radio listeners. So Ken, this is the crucial point there where things can be done. The next question becomes, is that the end of the story? And the answer is no, because there is another stage. And this one is the most important part of my work. And this is where we begin to talk about restored mind. So we spoke about the dangerous mind, how it is formed. We talk about the criminal mind when it crossed the line. And then we talk about the third book, which is restored mind. Let's go to that following slide before you start with your questions. And then we come to the restored mind. If you look at this slide, one of the most important things I have learned through all this work is this. The story of the human mind does not end with crime. Yeah, it's not end with crime. And I've seen it in my restorative justice programs in Medellin. In my book, you can have these stories, real testimonies of life, of people telling their story and how it started. And through the years of the research, it came to this third book, guide us to the theory, identity restoration theory. We'll speak about that later on. So in many cases, there comes a moment of awareness, a moment where the person begins to see their past clearly, not to justify it. Oh, I commit crime because my parents they abandoned me. No, not really. And someone, a professor in Bogota, told me, oh, but it seems like you want to justify crime or you want to romanticize crime. No, not really. This is not a romanticism of crime or justification of crime. No, it's a facing of crime. But we have to notice that behind all these stories of somebody committing a crime, remember, there was a child who was never heard. And I have seen this happen, especially in restorative justice circles. From that particular moment, something begins to shift when the person starts to have awareness of what they did in the past, right? It doesn't happen overnight or from the blue, but step by step. Now, what is a restored mind? A restored mind is not a perfect mind, because no one really has a perfect mind, right? Perfect is God. Restored mind is a conscious mind. It is a mind that chooses to confront its past, even when it is uncomfortable. A mind that accepts responsibility, not just in punishment, because it says, okay, I did this and I have to punish me. And that is what the society have a concept of criminal justice that we have to change. When I decided to do my PhD in criminal justice and criminology, I was thinking of this. After working with inmates, ex-offenders and offenders, and after working as a professor for many years and in research, why not, my professor was asking me, well, why not doing your doctorate in psychology? Well, it was Department of Psychology where I did my PhD in criminal justice at Walden University. However, although it has to do with psychology, and the mere core of my PhD was in psychology, but the title is criminal justice, I wanted to do it in this precisely because our system in the world is just of punishment. The kid, when I'm saying kid, remember, can be a teenager, child, adult, all are kids for me because they are children in the body of an adult committing a crime because they were not heard, they didn't have a space. Some commit the crime not because they wanted to commit the crime. So let's have that. When you they crossed the line, they were forced to cross the line in many places. They had to steal because they didn't have enough values built in childhood, saying that stealing is wrong. If they had enough values built in their childhood at home, not at school, the first school is home, at home. So if the mama and papa, if mother and father would have given enough values of this child in the childhood, no matter what hardship they were having, the child would be out there stealing people money because they would have enough values, Christian values, moral values, home values, telling them stealing is wrong. And they won't be going out there taking someone's money, right? So where it started, I'm not blaming the parents. Don't put words in that I'm not saying. And I'm not excusing the person who goes and steal because they came from a hardship life. No. But I'm saying it started somewhere. It didn't start there in the crime. It started before the crime was committed. So moral awareness. Let's speak about this part. To understand the impact of actions. To recognize the harm that was caused. And something very important happens here. The person begins to rebuild their identity. So when the person sits down and the person starts having, confronting the past, accepts responsibility, develops this moral awareness, the person starts rebuilds his and her identity. The person starts saying, hombre, I commit a mistake. Yeah, I made a mistake. I want to fix this problem. I don't want to do it again. The person's conscious. Mama didn't teach me that. Papa didn't teach me that. The pastor didn't teach me that. What am I doing? Why am I acting like this? And the person starts to rebuild his identity and wants to come back to society. And this is why this book, Restored Mind, is one of the most important of the books in my series, because it shows that transformation is not just possible, it is real. And I have seen sicarios, gunman in Medellin, in restorative justice circles, speaking of their past and why they commit the crime and how they committed and all the crazy things they did, and that they have a possibility of redemption. And we have to have this in mind, listeners. If God came to die on the cross for each and every one of us, don't you think that a person that committed a crime has the opportunity as well of pardon, of receiving pardon? So somebody will say, but what about those that commit crime over and over? That is different. That is a criminal mind. Yeah, that is being in a different sense of doing the action, and I will speak about that. So transformation, we says, is possible, right? We are seeing progression from a dangerous mind to a criminal mind, and ultimately to a restored mind. This is why understanding these three stages matters so much, because when we recognize where a person is in that process, we can respond differently, not only with control, but not only with punishment, but as well with restoration. So somebody will ask the question, but then if somebody commits a crime, they should go to prison. Yeah, but do you believe we should have loaded prisons or overcrowded prisons with people that should not be in prison? Because you have different type of crimes. For example, you see in prison somebody that, let's say the person goes to prison because he killed his wife, but he didn't want to kill her. One thing is to plan the action, which is a criminal mind, and one thing is to doing the action without planning, in a dangerous mind. So somebody who commit a crime by impulsivity, by wrath, by anger, is not a criminal. Is a dangerous mind who have an infraction of a law. So for example, if somebody killed someone because of impulsivity, an example, the man arrived to his home and he find his wife with another man. In jealousy, he takes a knife and he kills his wife, and he kills the lover or the other man. Yeah, he kills both of them. In his wrath, in his anger, he went and he commit this crime. Is he a criminal? He's not a criminal. It was a dangerous mind acting out of anger. Now, that is one. Let's say another scene now. A man who goes and who kills someone, and then after that, they hire him to continue killing for money. Or he plans to kill the person. He says, I want to kill her because I want to take her insurance, for example. Or I want to get rid of her because I don't want to be with her anymore. And he plans the act. And he says, I'm going to use this knife. I'm going to use this gun. I'm going to do it this way. You see, the planning of the action is a criminal mind. And the action without planning out of the blue is a dangerous mind in action, crossing the line. And we have to have that clear. Somebody who commit a crime without wanting to commit the crime is not a criminal. I should not be going to prison. Should have this space of a restorative justice circle of redemption and go back to society. Understand? So, for example, a drug dealer, he run and he commit go and take this package and take this package over there, and you will help your family because your mom has to go to the doctor. She needs medical treatment. You don't have the money. Go and do this. And the boys start thinking and thinking and thinking. put drugs in your stomach and pass the line, go as a mullah. And the child start thinking, I'm going to do this. Should I do this? They can take me to prison, but my mom needs medication. He has to go to the doctor. I don't have the money. I don't know what to do. He start praying. He start crying. He has struggle in his mind. And finally, he goes and he commit the crime, and he's caught. They're going to take him to prison, unfortunately, because he committed a crime. But is he a criminal? He's not a criminal. He didn't do it because he has a pattern of doing it. Now, if he goes and do it and he coronar, he crown, as how you will say in the drug dealing thing, and then he goes back and he do it again, and he takes drugs I don't know where, and this 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and has a pattern, he's a criminal. He's not a dangerous man. He's a criminal mind, right? He has a planning of doing an action. But if he does it out of a situation that comes from childhood, lack of values and so on, lack of all what we said, creating the dangerous mind, then this person is a dangerous mind in action. It's not a criminal mind. Have that in mind. All right, let's go to the following slide. How does this have a connection with San Andres Island? And if you would like to say something here, Ken, go ahead, please. We can ask the question.
Yeah, well, it is very difficult because, as you mentioned, this dangerous mind, they are a result of like a build-up pressure. You know, it's not a casual result or a isolated event or something that is maybe random. You know, it's not occasional. It's not as you mentioned, it's not like deliberate. It's something that come with time, build up on different kind of situation, different kind of experience, different kind of environments that push the person towards certain kind of attitude, certain kind of way of thinking and way of understanding life as well. And is at last it's survival, because sometimes in many cases I know for example, youth when I was younger, um, for example, in different neighborhoods that were introverts, and they had to create a personality because of the neighborhood they were involved in, and they had to become somebody extrovert and somebody when maybe aggressive and somebody to survive in the environment that they were involved in. You know, so it's not sometimes something like just personality, and he's that way because yes, or because he wants to, or just because he's stubborn. No, is a result sometimes of things. And when unconsciously as youth or as childs we create them blockages, and then they um structure around us, our own personality, our own we feelings to shield us, you know. And we do it from such a young age. We become unaware of it when we grow. So when we become teenage and young adults, we are not aware of them patterns that we have created to survive to those environments. You understand what so it is really difficult when like different institutions that are both San Andres case particularly, institutions, people, organizations, people in general from the community just find and just say this one is lazy, this one no one work because not. And it is really difficult because we're not living in a San Andres with the same opportunities as 30 years ago. We are not the same amount of people in the island as 30 years ago. The economy is totally different from 30 years ago. So the expectation that maybe with parents and with grandparents have for summer we were coming up is not achievable in the reality context that we live in today. So we have to go in the understands that all them things create pressure, and when they build pressure in the youth and in the children too.
Correct. Okay. Go ahead with the question then.
So connecting to the San Andres Island, a few weeks ago we discussed violence in the island and how does the concept of dangerous mind connect with the reality right in a Afro territory.
That's a good question. So let's move on to the following slide where I will explain this. Violence and social pressure. Um, when we talk about what is happening on the island, we know we're talking about violence and overpopulation and so on. We cannot only talk about crime. We have to talk about how those minds were shaped over time. So often under pressure, many of them, often without guidance, often without someone stepping in early enough. And this is where we shift um, the concept of saying that everyone acting is because he's a criminal mind. Because the moment we stop looking only at the behavior and we start understanding the process behind it, is the way how we respond to what is happening. One of the most important thing I want to say here is this. Violence does not define a community. We mentioned this many times. So don't think that the people from San Andres and Providence or the Rizals are violent people. Because when we look at a place like our islands, San Andres, Old Providence, and Catalina, it is very easy to focus on what we can see, overpopulated islands, etc. But what we are seeing is often a reflection of pressure that has been building over the time. We got to the point where we are overpopulated, and overpopulation is bringing all what we are seeing, right? And that pressure does not come from just one place. You have, again, population changes, more people, less space, and more tension. So when you have more people, you have less space and more tension. You have economic stress. Economic stress. Families trying to manage young people growing up without a clear sense of stability or direction. And there is something else that concerns me deeply, which is the lack of opportunities for young people. Because when a young person see a path forward, when they cannot see where they fit, that frustration builds. And if it does not being guided the right way, it will come out in other ways. So at the same time, we cannot ignore external influences. We have big external influences, new dynamics, new networks, new ideas that were not always part of the culture, but slowly begin to shape behavior. And when we talk about violence on our islands, then we cannot reduce it to individual choices alone. We have to understand the environment those choices are being made in. And this is very important. Understanding pressure does not mean to excuse the behavior. We can't say that this child is doing this because of this. No, that's not. We're not going to excuse the behavior. So it does not mean we respond with. This means that we respond with more clarity, more intention, and more humanity as well. So once we understand the pressure, once we understand the environment, the next question becomes what actually helps a person change? What really helps a person change? Because if pressure shapes behavior, then the response we give just matters. So when we are seeing this, understand the pressures help us respond intelligently. This means that when we see these kids, children and teenagers, or even adults committing crimes in our territory, we have to see how we can redeem these kids. It's not sending them to prison and making the prison bigger. And that's how they want to do it. Make a bigger prison to have more criminals. No, we should not have a prison in our territory at all. So we should have maybe a small place to lock them up for a couple of days and to have intervention with them, bring them to the society, put them to clean the beach, put them to clean the street, have supervision, and have them on action. Plant a field and put them to, plant yucca or cassava and plantation and have them on action in a rehabilitation process. That is what we should do, and not having them lock up and feeding them day and night, and they're eating, sleeping, and you know what else, right? And they're
And in
doing
another violent environment will create more of the same dangerous minds, same criminal minds, because we
correct.
put several criminal minds together to confine in situations where it generate conflict. They are not going to solve magically things and get to a point of an awareness and consciousness by themselves.
Yes, this is a very broad topic, Mr. Jairo Rodriguez. This is a very broad topic, and I don't know if we can continue on and move on instead of finishing at 9:30, because I would like to just finish with the whole presentation. Ken, you are having a feedback. Let's go to the following slide, and so we can move on, because we will continue with this topic soon, the importance of listening. After working in this field for many years, there's one thing that keeps coming back to me. People do not change just because they are punished. We were saying that just sending them to prison, they change, right? Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Harrison. We can continue. Great. So people are not just punished, sent to prison and receiving punishment and believe that they are going to change. The concept of criminal justice in the world is this, and I'm doing precisely the research. I'm going to publish something about that soon. Identity restoration theory is going to be published in a journal from the UK. It was accepted by the Walden University of a theory that is going to be, and I received a call yesterday from one of my professors congratulating me about that theory. I'm really happy about that, because identity restoration theory is not going to be applied only on San Andres and Providence Island. Identity restoration theory is a psychological theory that we're going to use in criminal justice to change the system and the concept of how you must manage people committing a crime. Either if there is a dangerous mind crossing the line and becoming a criminal mind, or if there is a criminal mind or a perpetrator in a recidivism process. Remember, recidivism is when they commit the crime over and over and go back to prison, and go back and come out and go back. That is what is happening. Somebody commits a crime, they send them to prison, come back out, commit the crime, go back to prison, and it's been a circle, a cycle. A cycle. You call that recidivism. So yes, we can put on the rise again. Thank you, Mr. Hyra is asking a question there. Yes, I can't answer you there because I'm here with my hands on the other screen. So okay, so thank you for that. So the importance of listening. Let's go on to this. People change when they feel understood. Punishment alone does not transform behavior. Listen to these concepts. Transformation begins with listening, guidance, belonging, and opportunity. These four cores. Listening, the first step. Guidance, belonging, and opportunity. So if you have in your mind a withdrawal kid, a hyperactivity kid, someone that is crossing the line, someone that is being flashed by these bandits and calling them to be part of groups, are you listening to this child? Are you creating opportunity for this child to express himself or herself? Are you guiding this child in the right way? Are you showing that this child belongs to somewhere? Where are our churches? Church people, come out of your church, of your temple, and go to the street as how Jesus used to do. Baptist, Seventh-day Adventist, Catholic, Christian Mission, Jehovah Witness, however you call yourself. All of us are Christians. And stop branding yourself with an identity of a name of a church. No matter if you are Seventh-day Adventist, Baptist, Christian Mission, whatever you are, Jehovah Witness, all of us are Christians following the same God. And Jesus, who is our model to follow, he was on the street attending prostitutes, attending whoremongers, attending drug addicts, attending fishermen, attending people on the street and preaching to everyone. We can't just be staying in our temples and believe that is the way how Jesus wants us to do. We have to go out there and attend these boys and girls needing us. You are the core structure or pillars of our Rizal identity. You have to go out there and help these kids, no matter if they speak Spanish or they speak Creole or English. No matter if they're Panyaman or people from the mainland or Turks or whatever, they're part of the territory, they might be residents. And we have to start doing something to get to these kids. So little by little, the person becomes more open when this is happening. Because listening is not passive. Listening creates space. It allows a person to begin making sense of their own story. And from there, other things begin to grow. And let's go to the church. Notice, for example, in your church, whatever denomination you are, You have, let's say, 30, 50, 100, 200 members of your church. I don't know how many. How many of them are active in your church? If the person is active in your church, participating, the person will continue going to church because the person have a voice in your church. You put them, oh, you're going to direct song service this week. Who can come and help clean the church? Who like to read the Bible text? You put people to participate. When people are participating, they feel active and they feel part of something. But if you're just as listener sitting there and hot in the bench, that person soon will gone and not come back. The person will have the point where they don't want to come back. I'm not active. I don't have no part. I don't have no voice. And they will look where to migrate. That is what's happening to our young people. They're looking where to migrate. And they're looking where to migrate because they feel important with the street. Yeah? So guidance starts there. Belonging begins to take shape. And when this opportunity comes, they are more likely to take them. So transformation does not begin with control. You can't control them and saying, you're not going out this. No, it begins with connection, right? Connection and giving them a voice. Now, let's go to the following slide. What's the message behind the book of Dangerous Minds? Well, we're talking about Dangerous Minds because the first book, this book, well, can't see it there because of my screen. I will show it now. The Dangerous Mind, what is the message behind this? Everything we have talked about here, Ken, it really comes down to something very simple. When we speak about dangerous minds, we're not just talking about behavior. We're talking about a story that started long before the behavior ever even appeared. In many of the cases I have seen behind the behavior, that there was one child who was not heard. A child who tried to express something and over time stopped crying. Yeah, stop trying to be heard or to be listened. And when that silence stays for too long, it begins to shape how the person sees themselves and how they relate to the world. So when we think about prevention, it cannot start at the moment of crime. By then, so much has already happened. It has to start earlier. It starts in how we listen, in how we respond, in whether a child feels seen, understood, and valued. Because when that connection is present early, the path can change. Please bring us back to the screen. And maybe instead of only asking, why did this person becomes dangerous? Ryan, you can bring us back to the screen now. Thank you. We begin to ask a different question. What was missing? And when they needed it most? So crime prevention begins long before crime happens, Ken. It begins with listening to children. And that is the main core of the book. Behind every dangerous mind, there is a child who was never heard. I received yesterday, I had an interview, I received an email from a psychology professor from a university in Turkey saying that he would like to interview me with the deans of the university and the president of the university, because they read an article that I selected from my book. I am a publisher in Psychology Today. Psychology Today is a very important magazine worldwide about psychology topics and is in majority of the countries in the world and in different languages. And I publish constant articles specifically about my book, Psychology of Pain, Psychology of Crime, and Psychology of Reparation. And they were very interested in an article I published about Santiago. Was a kid, 12-year-old kid from a school in Bogota, where I worked many, many, many years in the past, more than 16 years, I would say, more than 16 years ago. And we're saying that they wanted to know the neglect that Santiago was having and how he was not seen in the classroom as a child with special needs, with learning disabilities, learning disorders, and how the teachers did not see that. Well, because that's why this book is very important for teachers. It's very important for parents, very important for caregivers, very important for our society. Because you can notice that if you are continue going along and not seeing our kids and giving them the voice they need, then they will become a dangerous mind and they will cross the line and become a criminal mind. And that is what's happening. Do we want to continue farming dangerous minds, criminal minds in our society? And in having this situation, no. We can be part of stopping the cycle of creating dangerous minds. We can do it, all of us together, right? So, Ken, you'd like to say something there?
Indeed, as you mentioned, the very important for all the actors in the society were involved and touch with you, children, and that is everybody. Because as you mentioned, home in the family, in the neighborhoods, in the communities. For example, the difference when community used to involve more in in raising a child. For example, the example where you give when time a kid is on the street playing or around late in the night around 9, 10, you can ask that who you fan send the kid home or even though in them time if they find you up on the street or anything I know so then we carry themselves by the house and you know and people will be caring and worried about people where they not even seen a neighbor who are not acquainted with them somebody stranger then ask the who and the who you found what are they doing here and you know people were more involved but now with the overpopulation and with a lot of things and the violence people are scared to as well to for behavior being in that way because you got people where maybe not take it as well is a it's a very difficult reality now because um, we don't have that support of community because maybe when time mama or papa when they work, maybe you have the neighbor from town where pending say they eat when time they get from school or maybe say they help them wash the uniform so the next day they can be ready. Different things when neighborhood and community because we neighborhood them the family as well, you know, because with grandparents them to one side, with aunties and uncles to the other side, with cousins to the other side. So all those things as community, as racial people, we need to bring back as community, to be strong as community because leaving the children them and those histories like alone and isolated is when then create and that pressure that you mentioned build up when time then we leave them isolated and then no find that safe space na home na in a school na in a neighborhood na in a none other environment.
Yes, Ken. It seems like they're not reading me here in the internet chat. You have a feedback. It seems like they are not. Yes, both of us can have the microphone open at the same time. It seems like they're not reading me here in the internal chat. We are telling you that you must please move on to the following slide. Thank you. Go ahead, Ken.
I'm sorry. So no, in a place like San Andres, where communities and families close and are the central part fan for we life, how can people recognize when a young person is developing a dangerous mind, or when time in getting to that point that a member in the audience asks early, like when time we can recognize that precise moment?
That's a very important question. Let's move on to the following slide to answer this. One of the first thing we often recognize here is a young person at risk shows some signs such as feeling invisible or unheard, as we mentioned, deep anger or emotional withdrawal. You can see that the person has or two of the you can see the two of the extreme. One person can be or withdraw totally or shy, or the opposite, anger. And normally they can show it with being an ODD person or with oppositional defiant disorder. Showing, for example, that they reject authority. They don't like nobody to tell them anything. They don't like their parents to call their attention, nor their teachers, nor no one in the society to call their attention. And you can see as well loss of trust in adults or institutions. They don't trust adults or institutions. You can see searching for belonging in risky environments. So you can see kids that want to be up late at night and going out on the street, maybe the peatonal or the I don't know where, or going out late at night and environments that risky, like with motorcycle late at night. And now with what we're saying, we're not branding these kids. I want to have this clear. We're not saying that these particular kids that we're mentioning are those recognized as dangerous mind. No, we are saying that these are the behaviors or the risky behaviors to identify when a person is going in that path of being a dangerous mind to become a criminal mind. So have that clear. Again, feeling invisible or unheard, deep anger or emotional withdrawal, feeling or invisible and withdraw totally and being shy and not speaking to anyone, or the contrary, always anger, always angry, violent, and so on. Loss of trust in adults or institutions, searching for belonging in risky environments that we mentioned. Normalizing aggression as a way to gain respect. So for example, anything they like to, if somebody does something to them, they want to revenge of a person. Any little foolishness it could be, because you didn't allow me to put on the television, I am going to cut up your clothes, just to say something. Or I'm going to throw salt in the food and that no one can eat it. Foolishness. That can sound as foolishness. Or the animals, when they become aggressive with animals. I had an article about that precisely. That's one of the biggest symptoms when they are aggressive with animals. They start being aggressive with the dogs, with the cats, with the animals, chickens or whatever. They want to be killing animals on the street and so on. These signs are not crimes. They are signals that a young person is carrying pain that has not been heard or been addressed. When community listens early, dangerous minds can become restored minds. As I said again, these are not crimes. A place like San Andres where connection still exists, that is where the opportunity is. Because when those signals are recognized early, when you can see that is happening with our kids, if there's a teenager or a child in school or on the street or home, people choose to listen. If you do that, what could become a dangerous path can become a process of restoration. This is very, very important. And then I think we come to this part that prevents a dangerous mind from becoming a criminal mind. Let's go to that part. So what prevents, let's go to the following slide. What prevents a dangerous mind from becoming a criminal mind? This is very important. When we really look at what makes a difference, it starts very early. And it often starts closer than we think. It begins at home. Yeah. Early listening within the family at home. With something simple but powerful, which is listening. Taking the time to listen to your child. How did you go to school today? How was it? How did it go? Do you have any tarea? You talk in school? Did you play with your classmates? Do you have anything important you'd like to tell me from school? You have to ask questions as well that is not just yes, no answer, right? Before that, go back, please. Yeah, right there, just leave it there. The community also plays a very important role or key role here. Mentors and positive role models. Individuals who take the time to guide, especially for those young people who may not have the structure elsewhere at home. That's not the end of the story. Because you see, we have repetitive cycles of dangerous minds in our community. Mama and papa was not person who used to listen, so I'm going to do the same with my kids. Not because I want, but it comes unconsciously, and it goes from generation to generation. The generation of not listening, right? That pass on from generation to generation. So when we look at the school environment, that's the other part there. The school environment is important because teachers have to dedicate the time as well to listen to your students. It doesn't have to be during your class all the time. You have break time. You have different times where you can notice a particularity. This kid is not talking to anyone. This kid is not socializing with anyone. This kid is shy in the class. This kid is coming maybe with neglect, showing act of neglect. This kid is coming with his uniform dirty, with his shoes, the way how he coming with his shoes, his sneakers, his backpack is dirty, his books, the books are dirty, the books are not in order. The way how the kids is writing, maybe the kids is having confusion of letters, he's having dyslexia. So the learning disabilities they're happening at school as well is a symptom of what is going on with a dangerous mind. Don't believe that the kid is becoming a dyslexic kid from the blue, or a dyscalculia when he has problems with numbers from the blue. Dyscalculia, problems with numbers, dyslexia, problems with letters, confusion of letters, right? Or any other learning disability if he's a slow learner. And you have to have in mind as a teacher the types of students you have in your classroom. If they are listeners, yeah, they learn by listening. If they are visuals, they learn by seeing. If they're kinesthetic, if they're learned by touching. So the problem with your excuse, my dear colleague psychologists, the problem with our psychologists at schools, and I hope you can be listening to what I'm saying, is that many of our psychologists are not educational psychologists. It's just like a doctor. You study medicine, but you are not an orthopedist. You study medicine, but you are not a heart doctor or whatever specialization a doctor can have. You study your medicine and you can, a broad concept of all medicine, but then you specialize in a specific area. If orthopedists like Dr. Ralph Newball, or eye doctor, so we call him as Dr. Lyle Newball, etc. Right? You specialize in a particular area and then you become a specialized in that concept. So our psychologists need to specialize in education. Make a specialization in education psychology or a master's in educational psychology to be able to attend our kids in school. And you, principal of school, need to have that in mind as well. That the psychologists and the counselors at our school, they need to specialize in learning disabilities in education to help our kids, because they are not noticing our ADHD students or ODD students or learning behavioral students that we're having in our classrooms. There are many, not one or two or three in the classrooms. And if you have a general diagnosis on our archipelago, you will notice how many students with dyslexia we have, how many students with dyscalculia we have. What are you doing about it? Or different learning disabilities. Okay, so prevention is important. So we must as well think on real opportunities for these kids, not just activities to pass time, but opportunities that give them a sense of belonging, purpose, and dignity. Because when a young person begins to feel that they matter, that they have direction, that something shifts, something will shift internally. When you show them, let's go to the point. I was talking to Ken about this the other day. All of us can remember our very terrible bad teacher and our very good teacher, right? You can remember that excellent teacher you had if he's in primary, high school, whatever. I remember my very good teacher, Miss Vilma Taylor from Providence. Miss Vilma Taylor was the best teacher I ever had in my entire life. She was my first grade teacher. She taught me to read. And she always used to say, excellent, you are so intelligent, very good. And those encouraging words, I will never forget them. And I was 6 years old and my age today, and I still remember Miss Vilma Taylor. I could never forget. And I passed through my elementary, high school, universities, my different degrees. Modestly, I'm saying this, my master's, my PhD. And I've never had a teacher such as good as Miss Vilma Taylor, because every single teacher, every single student was excellent for her. I remember ex-student in the classroom was not reading well, and she used to, the little improvement that person was having, she was telling him always, excellent, you did a very good job today, you are so bright, you are so smart. And I started noticing how she was just encouraging all the time. And she had some beard. And my mom used to tell me that if you eat out of a pot, you get beard. That was a phrase she had when we were a kid. Don't eat out of the pot, you have plate, because if you eat out of a pot, you will get beard. And I went to her, and I was there at the desk, and she was reading La M con la A ma, la M con la M. Yeah, I was learning to read, and I look up at her, and I saw that she had beard. I said, Miss Vilma, you eat out of pot. She said, why are you saying that? She said, you eat out of pot because my mom says who eat out of pot gets beard. She laughed and she said, I have to go and talk to Miss Lovey about this. And she went, I remember she told my mom, Junie, I used to call me Junie. Junie said that I eat out of pot because I have beard. And she said, yes, because I remember I telling them that if you eat out of pot, you get beard. And I will never forget that. And I was 6 years old. My very good teacher, Miss Vilma, rest in peace. Excellent teacher in our archipelago. You know what I'm saying? We have excellent teachers around. I know every single one of you are struggling with 35, 40 kids in a classroom, having difficulties to deal with so many. I know it's difficult as well to deal with special needs kids in the classroom at the same time. You're not prepared, and it's a challenge. But just don't forget the encouraging words. A word that can make a difference in your classroom. A child that you are seeing slow has problems behind it. A problem that you are seeing, a child that you are seeing withdraw, that shy and doesn't want to participate, has some problems behind it. Childhood trauma is a reality. And childhood trauma causes very crazy conflict in our world today because it forms a dangerous mind, and then the person can become a criminal mind. Let's go to our following slide. We have this clear how we can help to prevent a dangerous mind with this one. Let's go to our following slide. After studying dangerous mind, call me this question, Ken, please.
Well, if we continue with the conversation, after studying dangerous minds, criminal minds, and the process after, which is restore minds, what gave the person the opportunity to move from a dangerous mind towards restoration instead of continuing that same patterns?
Very good question there, Ken, because we believe that everything is gone, right? We believe that there is no opportunity of a kid that passes, he was dangerous mind, neglect and whatever, then he pass on and he become a criminal mind, knowing he's in the path of vandalism or gangs or whatever, or committing crimes or something going on as a criminal mind. And how can we, what can we do? When we really look at what allows that shift to happen, it always comes back to certain human experiences. It's not something abstract, but very real. Most of the time, it begins with something simple. Someone who truly listens. Let's go on to the following slide here. Someone who truly listens. So, transformation becomes possible when a person encounters someone who truly listens. Not listening to correct his mistakes, not listening to judge what he has done, but listening to understand. And for many individuals, that is the first time they feel seen in a real way. From there, something begins to change inside of that person. Accountability starts to develop. The person starts to say, yeah, I did it wrong and I have to do something. And I've seen it in the restorative justice cycles or circles in Medellin, Colombia, where ex-offenders committing terrible crimes, you can have them in my book. I think we'll have the space to read some of them now. And you have some real testimonies of life. Of course, the names were changed to protect the identity of the ex-offenders. So at the same time of accountability and acceptance of responsibility, guidance from mentors or positive role models. Role models were people who can redirect their thinking, people from our community who can help, right? And alongside, apart from this, a sense of belonging and dignity. There has to be a real opportunity to rebuild identity and purpose. The chance to rebuild their identity in the community, to develop purpose. And when all of these elements, someone who listens, accountability, where they accept responsibility, guidance from mentors or positive role models, a sense of belonging and dignity in your community, opportunities to rebuild their identity and purpose. Restoration begins when pain is recognized, responsibility accepted, and a new path becomes possible. This is something very important, and we have to start working on policies. Policies with our leaders in our community, in our territory, Rizal territory, in our circle of criminal justice. Policies that can help change the mentality that somebody commit a crime and was in Tampa and came back and can't get a job. That is happening right now. People committing crime, going to prison, coming out, they are ex-offenders, and they have a brand on them as an offender or ex-offender, or what do you call it in Spanish? Ex-convictos, ex-convicts, right? Or ex-offender now is what it's called today. This is happening not just in San Andres and Providence Island, but in the whole world, where people have a brand on them and it's difficult for them to get a job. In my dissertation for my doctoral study, I had the opportunity to speak with many ex-offenders. Somebody is saying opportunities and need to know that they are important members of society. For many, a lack of expressed love causes significant harm to this generation. Very good sample. Thank you for that comment, and that is correct. They need opportunities and know that although they commit a crime, they can come back to society in a positive way, right? This is very important. Okay, let's move on to the following slide. And then we move to the transition to identity restoration theory. This is a book that is going to be published now in April, and it was accepted, Identity Restoration Theory, IRT in Caribbean Criminal Justice, Education and Rehabilitation for Reintegration. Springer Nature is going to publish this book. Is the theory, psychological theory that I wrote after my dissertation and my long research with the 3 books of Criminal Minds, Dangerous Minds, and Restored Minds. And this is where the work started to come together. Because studying Dangerous Minds, Criminal Minds, and Restored Minds across different environments, as I mentioned, I realized that transformation was not random. There was a pattern behind it, and there was a structure behind all of it. And this is what I led to the development of this theory. Ken, when we started to emerge from all this work, is what I call identity restoration theory. And it is the core and a very simple but powerful idea that real transformation does not happen from the night, over the night, right? It takes time. It happens at the level of identity, when a person can recognize his identity. Not defined by what they did in the past, but who they really capable of to become. So let's put it this way. Somebody from Medellin goes to prison in Medellin, let's say Cárcel Bellavista prison, where I had the opportunity to interview many offenders. So the person is in the Bellavista prison in Medellin, Colombia, and the person is not getting his bandeja paisa. The person is not listening to his Antioqueño music. The person is not having part of his culture in prison with the activities in prison, because the guardianes or the guards are from elsewhere from Medellin, and he's not receiving classes about Antioquia or Medellin. He's not receiving any food up from Medellin. He's building certain type of apathy against what is happening in his rehabilitation process, and he comes out and reoffend. And there are many research about this. And this identity restoration theory precisely is that. An inmate that is islander or Rizal should go to prison if he commits a crime. Yes, depends on the crime. And if he goes to prison, inside of the prison system, he has to receive Creole from his teachers. He has to receive spirituality, no matter what denomination he is, Christianity, in the prison. He has to receive fishing, You have to receive activities that has to do with hotels and so on. Yeah. And this is where I speak about identity, belonging, moral responsibility, cultural connection. The cultural connection is very important, and personal agency. Restoration begins when individuals reconnect with who they are, where they come from, and the values that guide their lives. That was forgotten. That's why they committed crime. So when the person goes to prison or a restorative justice cycle, because they don't have to go to prison precisely, they can go in a restorative justice cycle by the Rizal authority. We can have some restorative justice cycle that the person commits a crime, the person Rizal, we have an agreement, because this is happening in Medellin, a different place, and it can happen in San Andres. We have an agreement with the authority. We have here from Jorge Andres, excellent question. I believe the first step is to focus on genetics, family history, then promote education from home and school. That is very good, because genetic has an important part to do as well. Jorge Andres, I think it's Jorge Andres. Yeah, thank you for that. But then we were saying the connection with his culture is important, because connecting the person with his identity will restore him back to the community. And that means the personal agency. He has to have the connection from when he committed the crime and when he's there in the circle of restoration. How does that work in identity restoration theory? I'm going to explain to you. The prison, call it whatever it's called, I think La Esperanza, whatever it's called in San Andres, the prison and the restorative justice cycle programs on the island needs to have, listen to this, everyone, they need to have connections with our hotels, restaurants, all the different businesses on island. And these businesses need to get, because there is a law or lawyers that you can get discount on whatever, I don't know what it is, maybe on your taxes or your, I don't know, discount for something in taxes or whatever, if you embrace the opportunity to hire an ex-offender. If you hire an ex-offender in your company, then you can have some benefits from the government in money-wise or whatever. And many countries is applying that today. Hiring ex-offenders, giving them the second chance, the opportunity. And that starts from when they're in prison. They get the training in prison, saying the hotel, I don't know, let's say the Tone Hotel wants to hire 5 room service, or let's call it room service. And then you train them in the prison in room service, and they come out and practice in the hotel before coming out of prison. And then when they come out, they have the job at the hotel. So you connect or rise of people that offended and are in Tampa or wherever they are around Colombia in the same island, and you give them the opportunity to go back to rehabilitation, re-socialization, you call it, to go back to society. That is identity restoration theory. Now, let's move on to the following slide. Time is running. Again, this is a very broad topic, and we will continue to discuss this in future session. So let's understand identity restoration theory. So here we said first, we break it down in a simple way here. We can open it bigger so we can see it's too small. What we begin to see is connection with self, connection with the community, connection with moral purpose. When the connection weakens, individuals lose direction and belonging. Identity restoration theory proposes that rehabilitation begins when these connections are rebuilt. Rebuilding the self, rebuilding connection with community, and rebuilding connection with moral purposes. Restoration means helping individuals to what? To recover or redirect or rediscover who they are. Remember who they are as a riser. Reconnect with their community. If it's the community of the Hill, community of San Luis, where the community are, they belong to. And rebuild moral responsibility and purpose. You can bring us back now to the screen. That is what it's talking about, right? And then we can move on to the following slide where you have, I think, another question. Again, this topic is very broad, but then we are trying to move and cover the whole of it so we can
for example, well, in this occasion, well, like carrying to San Andres reality as well, how does the theory for identity restoration can change the way we should think about rehabilitation and justice in our territory?
Very good question, Ken. Let's move on to the following slide where we can explain that. Is it change the way how we understand that, Ken? Is to change the way how we understand the behavior behind this. Let's move on to the following slide, please. So we have the two here that we can see. We have the traditional justice, and we have additional identity restoration theory. So if we focus on identity restoration theory, we can see that we understand the person behind the crime. We can see that we rebuild identity and dignity. We can see that we restore connection with the community. And we can see that we create opportunities for reintegration. This is identity restoration theory. It goes to their identity, who they are as a riser, and brings them back to the community, right? Brings them back to their people. And we have the traditional justice system, which focuses on punishment, control of behavior, consequences after the crime. So the shift changes everything. It moves rehabilitation away from control alone and toward understanding the person behind the offender. It moves us from punishment as the main response to transformation as the goal. So it moves us from seeing individual as a case, a criminal case, to seeing them as a person who is going through a process. And it helps us reshapes how we think about justice as well, because justice is no longer only about consequences. It becomes about responsibility, restoration, and reintegration. To restore what they did, damage they commit, for them to take responsibility, but to reintegrate them back to society. These are men and women that coming back out to work our society. And if we're not doing a complete and correct rehabilitation, they will reoffend. And we have research about this, of the recidivism. I wrote an article about that precisely in criminal justice a couple months ago, about how recidivism is being affected because of the education they're receiving in prison. The wrong education they're receiving in prison is guiding people to come out and reoffend. They are not coming. So we have reoffenders, constant reoffenders, and we call that recidivism. So traditional justice versus identity restoration. Let's move on that slide, please. Let's leave it there. How does identity restoration theory change the way we should think? No, the following one. Let's go to the following one, because I think we moved behind. No, you went too farther behind. Yeah. Okay, so let's leave it the one before that one. The one before that one. Let's leave it there. Yeah. So when we look at the two slides, then we have it clear that what we need to do is to understand the person behind the crime, rebuild identity and dignity, bring them back to their roots and origins, restore connection with the community, give them in contacts with hotels, or if I want to be a fisherman, okay, the Association of Fishermen can embrace them and give them a job as a fisherman. Or I want to work as a bartender. Of course, you can get your training as a bartender, and you take the bartending course there, and you can get connection with a bar for them to come out and be a bartender. Or I want to get connection maybe to work on a cruise when I come out. Of course, we can have the connection with a cruise line, and they can get the training in prison, and then they come out and we ship them off on a boat. You have to give these people opportunity inside the prison in their education system, that when they come out, they can have a second chance. And that is part of the rehabilitation process. All right, let's leave it there and let's move on to the following slide, Ken.
All right, in this moment now, I would like to maybe encourage you, if you have maybe a particular section, a particular phrase, or particular reference that you would like to highlight right now in this moment, or you consider really, really meaningful right now.
Okay, so yes, from my book, Dangerous Minds, psychology of crime, pain, and reparation. There is many parts that I would like to maybe focus, but let's read about Mateo. Mateo is one of those that were in one of the restorative justice cycle in Medellin. I'm going to read just a section of chapter 12. It says, Mateo is one of those children. Well, I was explaining the children that came from neglect and silence of home and so on. And then after that, I said, Mateo is one of those children. He's 12 years old. Of course, I did meet him when he was 12. He's now 22, if I'm not mistaken, in the restorative justice cycle. But he was telling me the story of where everything started. And everything started when he was a child, right? And so Mateo, he says he's 12 years old, small for his age, with eyes too mature for the boyish face that carries them. Every morning before the sun has fully risen, he wakes his younger siblings, five of them, all smaller, all hungry. While his mother is still asleep, her body exhausted after returning from the streets at dawn. She sells herself not out of vice but out of desperation. His father, a man swallowed by addiction, is often gone for days. The little room they live in smells of dampness and sadness, a mixture of sweat, kerosene, and baby powder. There is no breakfast, only the promise that Mateo will bring something back from the streets. He puts on his school uniform, which no longer fits. I missed that part. He puts on his school uniform, which no longer fits, and slips the box of candies around his neck. After school, he will sell them in buses and at intersections and near the crowded station of Medellin. In class, he rarely speaks. Listen to this, teachers. In class, Mateo rarely speaks. He sits at the back, watching the teacher's mouth move as if it's from another world. When the bell rings, he runs not to play, but to work. His day begins when others finish theirs. He walks through traffic, waving between buses that exhale black smoke, offering candies with a forced smile. A candy for a coin, senora, he says, repeating the same phrase 100 times until it loses meaning. Some people give him money without looking. Others scold him for working instead of studying. He never explains. He knows that no one really wants to know the story behind a child selling sweets at sunset. When the night falls, Mateo returns home with a few coins. His brothers run to him, calling his name as if he was their father. They share whatever he has bought: rice, bread, sometimes a few eggs. His mother eats little, his father nothing. Then silence returns, heavy and familiar. And the story goes on. In that particular section, I speaks about the neglect that Mateo was having at home. He had 5 siblings to attend. He used to go to school and he was in the back of the classroom and the teachers didn't even notice him. He was just then one more in the classroom, not paying attention, not listening. But he had a box there with candies that he put around his neck, hanging the box around his neck and selling candies after school every day. For what? To go and feed his 5 siblings, brothers and sisters. And he was only 12 years old. And there is where he started selling candies on the street. A decent, calm kid. Yeah, very intelligent, very smart. And today at 22 years old in a circle, a restorative justice circle, he was telling me this story where everything started in neglect. And if you go to the book, to many, many other stories, we can read similarity, the same pattern of neglect, of abandonment, emotional abandonment, of where this child started to build up a silence that didn't have a way to come out. was building there, and finally came out with crime. Ken.
This is a very touching part of the book because well, it reminds me of maybe sometimes just like how we have with that teacher and the people that passes by Mateo on the streets. Like sometimes in our daily life, things become part of the view. You know, we become blind to certain things. So understanding that these stories coming from really young age and then coming with a lot of history behind is really important. So if we continue, when you look back at all the individual you have studied and interviewed during this time and these years, um, what are them the things that society fail to see and, as I mentioned, like we normalize or we just overlook?
Thank you for that question, Ken. That is a very important question. What do they have in common, and what do society fails to see? The individuals I have studied and spoken with over the years in Medellin, Cali, Bogota, ex-offenders from San Andres and Providence, in the Cayman Islands, in the United States, because the research is abroad, different types of offenders and ex-offenders, inside of prisons and outside of prison. So offenders, those are inside the prison. Ex-offenders, those that came out of prison. And in all those different contexts, I was not basing just on one context of population, but it was a broad context of different populations, showing the Caribbean people, showing the United American people, showing Colombian people, showing the rise of people, different contexts of different people. So many of them grew up in environments where something essential was missing. Not always material things, because we believe that criminality starts with poor people, and that's a very bad concept we have, right? But emotional presence. There was silence where guidance should have been, and pain that that no one helped them understand. Over time, that begins to shape how a person sees themselves. You start to notice a pattern, a quiet search for belonging, for identity, for recognition. And let's move to the following slide. Maybe I have it there. Yes. What society? Okay, yes. Understanding pain and unresolved emotional wounds. A childhood marked by silence and neglect, correct. Experience of rejection, humiliation, or invisibility. I mentioned a search for belonging and identity, correct. A life where no one truly listened. They are not only offenders, they are individuals whose pain was never understood. And as well, behind every crime, there is a story. So is a difference between the offenders are serial, part of a seriality, if you call it that way, in the United States. In other words, is a difference between a serial killer. I interviewed many of those, and you'll see those in my book, Criminal Minds. I mentioned one or two in the book, Dangerous Minds, as well, how those serial killers were dangerous minds before they become a serial killer. I had serial killer experience as well in Medellin. I interviewed ex-sicarios or gunmen. I interviewed sicarios or gunmen in the United States. I have their experience as well in the book, The Criminal Minds and Dangerous Minds. And it's a different story, a different pattern with the ex-offender, but when they are, or the offenders, but when they are serial killers or serial rapers or rapists, right? Or sexual offenders, is a difference. And out of all of these, the one that is very difficult to rehabilitate is the the offenders in sexuality, or what has to do with sexual offenders. Definitely, research shows that they will never definitely recover totally, right? They will come out of prison after many years, and they will still continue there with the pattern of offending, other girls, boys, or women, men, or whatever. So the offenders are in sexual part, that's a very difficult part to really deal with, because it's come from profound trauma from childhood and so on. So is a difference in these type of offenders that plan their offense or plan their crimes being a criminal mind with these kids, men and women, boys and girls, starting in childhood neglect, shaped by silence and neglect. So these criminal minds and dangerous minds will make that difference. A dangerous mind is a mind that can really be restored easier. A criminal mind can be restored as well, but is more challenging or more difficult because it has profound trauma that started from when they were a dangerous mind and they passed to become a criminal mind. All right, let's move on, Ken.
Sarah, like you second, I had to take off the image because I had to connect the phone and I connected via cell phone at the moment. So we'll continue with the conversation. As as you mentioned, the case from Mateo, maybe there's another case or another section of the book you would like to share.
Yes, I would like to mention in my book, Ken, the microphone. How about? Okay, thank you. Page 32, maybe, where I mentioned Old Providence. I'd like to mention this part of my book. We're soon coming to an end. I know it's a very long topic, and thank you all for your patience and for your listening. Beyond the mainland and large islands, the same silent pedagogy has begun to whisper in Old Providence. There are sea still protects a people. So there, the sea still protects a people whose faith and language carry centuries of endurance. The Rizal culture, deeply rooted in spirituality and moral order, has resisted the moral decay that reached San Andres. Yet its youth are not immune to the same temptations. Listen, my Providence people, listen. The street in Old Providence may not resemble the alleys of Medellin or the crowded corners of San Andres, but its presence is more subtle. It hides behind modern distractions, behind the fascination with false profit, and behind the loss of traditional pride. In my visits and interviews, islanders often spoke of the fear that Old Providence could lose its calm dignity. The elders remember a time when every child knew the names of the fishermen, when the church bell marked the rhythm of life, and when respect for family and community was the island's moral compass. Today, those memories compete with the noise of imported habits and the silent pressure of drug routes that seek to exploit the innocence of isolation. The cartels, aware of the island's strategy geography, approach its youth not through violence but through seduction. They offer the illusion of power in a place where opportunity is scarce. Old Providence still stands as a moral frontier. Its people understand that once crimes become culture, restoration becomes an uphill battle. Yet the island's resistance depends on education, not surveillance. The true defense of a culture begins when its children learn to value the dignity of belonging more than illusion of profit. Community elders, pastors, and teachers continue to fight for that consciousness, reminding the youth that the greatest wealth of the island lies not in what can be sold, but in what can be preserved. And I will finish with this section here, this paragraph. I recall the words of an old fisherman who told me, "The street does not begin with pavement. It begins when the heart forgets the home." His sentence remained the philosophy of prevention itself. When the moral foundations of a home remain strong, the street loses its authority. Old Providence, though small, teaches that lessons to the world. The preservation of culture is not a matter of nostalgia. It is a strategy of survival. When identity remains intact, crimes loses its disguise. This is a special section I dedicated to my Providence people. Ken. Ken, you're on silence.
Sorry. Well, if we continue with the conversation now, after the research and experience, like generally, what is the most important thing or most remarkable thing that you have learned to about the human mind?
Yes, and this is the last section to finish with my final message, Ken. After years of research working directly with individuals, criminal minds, dangerous minds, restored minds in this restorative justice cycles, in different contexts, as I mentioned, Medellin, Cali, Bogota, San Andres, Cayman Islands, the United States, in prisons in Kentucky, and different prisons in the United States. And I'm really thankful for the opportunity I had um, with the prisons in the United States. The directors of these prisons gave me the opportunity to speak with inmates via video link, and of course with their tablet, the application they have a special app where you can go to the app and you can connect with inmates and talk to them, and you join them with their number, and they tell you their story and so on. I have a lot of these stories in my books. So the human mind is not born violent. It is shaped. It is shaped through experiences, through relationships, and through the environment a person grows up in. So we can create a different environment for kids and our teenagers. What appears again and again and again, over and over, is when pain is not recognized, it does not disappear. Children and teenagers having pain, we need to identify what is going on with them. It transforms if it's not recognized. It can become anger, disconnection, or behavior that is later misunderstood, right, when they commit a crime. When someone feels invisible for long enough, they will search for recognition somewhere. So even if the place carries risk, they will go to risky scenarios and are trying to feel a connection with these environments. But the most important lesson is not only about the mind, how the mind breaks. It is about how it can change as well. So because when a person is finally heard, truly understood, and guided, something begins to shift. And that is where transformation becomes possible. And of course, in my book, Restored Minds, I speak about God. Of course, we can't take God out of the equation. God is the only one capable of really transform a mind. God is the only one, of course, with the help of psychologists and sociologists and counselors and different team that can participate in their rehabilitation, right? But it's not just teachers and pastors and counselors and spiritual leaders and parents and everybody from our territory that can involve in helping these kids, children and teenagers. God must be the first and the center part of it. So without God, nothing is possible, right? My final message, Ken, that I would like to give, we can take off this slide. My final message that I would like to give to finish this important topic. First, I'm really happy for this opportunity to talk about my books. My final message is for parents, for teachers, for tutors, for caregivers, for everyone across our islands who works with children and young people. I would say this. There is always an opportunity to help those who are already involved in crime. But there is also a powerful opportunity to reach them much earlier, before they arrive at that point, before they cross the line to become from a dangerous mind to a criminal mind. And often, the difference comes down to something simple, yet deeply meaningful: paying attention, listening with intention, and recognizing when something begins to change. Many young people are not in need of immediate correction. They're in need of connection, not correction. So they need someone who sees them, who takes the time to understand what they are carrying, even when they cannot express it early. So it's important that when space is missing, they will look at that space somewhere else. So look for the space somewhere else. If it's not at home, it will be on the street. If it's not in school, it will be on the street. And sometimes that search leads them in the wrong direction. So every conversation we can have about this topic matters, because every moment of guidance matters. A teacher who notices, a parent who truly listens, a mentor who remains consistent. Those actions, when they seem even small, can change the course of a life. So the responsibility is shared, not only to respond when something goes wrong. We want to react when we see crime, right? But to create environments, that's what we have to do. Create environments where young people feel heard. For example, the Rizal Council, the Rizal Youth Council that Ken is leading out, that is an excellent opportunity for young people. Valued and guided from the beginning, that is something important. So these kids or young people or your persons, they feel that sense of belonging. So when they have this, or they feel understood, when they need to seek identity somewhere, it will be through meaningful paths, where they can really feel connection. That is where real prevention begins. So I want to encourage everyone listening to this program today to be part of this transformation or restored minds. We can restore our children and youth minds because they have bad examples and bad track and bad roots. Yeah. And they're following bad models. But that can change. That can change. We can be part of it. Ken. Ken, your microphone is on silence.
Sorry about the pandy. On the phone, the tactile is bothering a little bit. As you mentioned, is a very, very important topic for teachers and parents and um, families in general, because they are the first two contacts, the first two places where you look to be listened, to be heard, and to be able to have that company, that maybe that space, that opportunity to maybe open up about certain specific theme, a specific topic, a conversation where they might need to have. And well, we have to know to their children, maybe they not know how to begin and maybe start those conversations and maybe open those places themselves. So it's very important to be able to, and with all those elements that you have mentioned this morning, and you will continue to mention during the different programs, use them to identify and understand how, as different actors, you can be aware and be present in the different stages of the dangerous mind to prevent them to become criminal minds.
Very good. If we put on the last, thank you, Ken. If we put on the last slide, we can see where they can get the book. If you're interested in acquiring, you can put on the last slide, and you can see that you can find it on Google Play Books, and you can find it on Amazon, and it's available as well through academic and research platforms. Psychology of Pain, Crime, and Reparation. And with the core behind every dangerous mind, there is a child who was not heard. This book is getting well known now in the United States in criminal justice, in the Caribbean section of identity restoration theory, with this theory, and it's going to be used in a university in Turkey, one in Australia, and one in New Zealand, and of course in the United Kingdom with the publication now in April of the identity restoration psychological theory. So if it's been getting well known worldwide in something that is very important for us, we should not have it like that. You don't have to get the book if you wish, right? But we can practice the concepts behind it of a deep research for many years, that behind every dangerous mind there is a child who was not heard. Try and listen to your children. Try and listen to your youth. Change the mentality that you have of just leaving them and without talking to them. It's important. They are important and they need to speak. If they don't speak to you, they will speak to someone on the street, right? So they need to speak to you as a parent. They need to speak to you as a teacher. For not to go out there and speak to someone that they should not be speaking to, well, in the good context. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you again next Wednesday on our educational program at 8:30. Remember, every Wednesday at 8:30, we have an educational section, and we see you at that time. Thank you all. Goodbye. I think we
Rise and people, it's time for the uprising. Let us rise and shine.
When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when you feel like giving up, as you try to bother him,
when you feel like smiling, but your heart feels so trill, yeah. Don't give up, rest if you will, but keep your unbroken will, yeah.
Rise and shine like the sun, the moon, and the stars in the sky.
Rise and shine
again and again, lift your head high.
Rise and shine
so please, don't you cry.
Rise and shine
Call on Jah, He will satisfy.
Once again, me say rise, I shall rise. We don't have time to cry, everything will be fine. We stay strong, it's time to move on. We can reach to the stars, to the moon, to the sun.
This is something me want to know fi understand. Rise and people give thanks to the Almighty One. Cause all of the grown are singing song. Rise and shine, so shall sing in a this a song.
Rise and shine, rise.
Where there is light, there will be hope.
Rise and shine, rise.
Oh, no, Jah, that is for sure.
Rise and shine, rise.
Standing up strong, I reach for your goal.
Rise and shine, rise.
Let us all unite with one heart and soul. One day our hearts will no more be hurt. All the pain and suffering rise on, it will surely work.
The day we come together and stand up with determination,
Then rise our nation
we'll shout out for liberation. To take back the territory. Cause this land that we fight to free our dignity. Free the chains and bandage of colony.
far away from home, but still worry about their own. Maybe strangle and decolonize, therefore it had to run.
Waiting for its diaspora through the island in the sun. Rise and shine, out the rise and all ye daughters and sons, yeah.
And again, it will be nice. Do not yourself minimize. Sense of belonging must be sky high. Stand up strong like sun, where the sun of the sky.
Leave behind nights of terror and fear. Just remember Jah come when the morning clear. Praise Jah and put your hand up in the air. In Jah hand now everything gone clear.
Wake up and live, rise and we soon clear the hill. If we stick together still, no way they could break our will. It's time to be great again. Arise and shine. Wake up and live. Booyaka, sayaka, mayaka. To free oneself from this corruption.